X. The judge doesn't look up. X. That's the first thing Seren Addo notices when she walks into the Waterloo County Courthouse at 7:43 in the morning. Judge Warren Ashby is already at his bench, reading something, a paper coffee cup steaming beside his left hand. He doesn't look up when the door opens. He doesn't look up when the clerk drops a folder. X. He doesn't look up when Seren takes a seat in the third row and sets her daughter's drawing on her knee, a crayon sun, lopsided and enormous, the way only a 6-year-old son can be. X. He won't look up at her for 3 more weeks. X. By then, everything will have changed. X. Seren is 31. She served 8 years with the Canadian Armed Forces, 2 tours in Latvia, 1 rotation in Mali, where she learned that the sound a vehicle makes when it rolls over certain soil is different from the sound it makes over pavement, and that difference matters. She came home to Kitchener in the spring of 2021 with a duffel bag, an honorable discharge, and a daughter she hadn't raised yet. Her sister Bev had been keeping Amara. Bev didn't complain, X, but Seren saw what 6 years of raising someone else's child looked like on a person's face, and she didn't ask Bev to keep doing it. X. She found a basement apartment on Weber Street East. She found a job doing security assessments for a logistics firm downtown. She enrolled Amara in junior kindergarten at St. Agnes and learned slowly, painfully, how to pack a lunch that a 6-year-old would actually eat. X. She was doing okay, not good, but okay, and okay for Seren was enough. X. The morning it started, it was a Tuesday in October. Cold already, that particular Kitchener cold that comes in off the fields and sits in your bones. Seren was walking Amara to school. They cut through Victoria Park the way they always did, past the fountain they'd turned off for the season, past the bandshell where pigeons roosted in the rafters. X. Amara had her backpack on and she was dragging a stick along the iron fence the way kids do, making that clattering noise that adults pretend to find annoying but secretly love. X. Then Amara stopped. X. She tugged Seren's sleeve. X. Mama, she said. X. Seren looked where her daughter was pointing. X. On the bench beside the war memorial sat an old man. He was wearing a blazer over a cardigan, dress trousers, shoes that had been polished recently. He was sitting very still in the way that people sit when they are trying not to let anyone see that something is wrong. His left hand was pressed flat against his chest. His breathing was visible even from 10 feet away. X. Seren was beside him before she'd finished thinking. X. Sir, she said. She crouched down to his level. Sir, can you hear me? X. He looked at her. His eyes were clear. That was something. But his color was wrong. The gray at the edges of his lips, the sweat on his temple despite the cold. X. I'm fine, he said, the way people say it when they are not. X. I don't think you are, Seren said very quietly without drama. I'm going to call an ambulance. What's your name? X. He didn't answer right away. He looked past her, at the fountain, at the pigeons, at Amara, who was standing 3 feet back with the stick still in her hand and her eyes wide and serious. X. Clifford, he said. Clifford Ashby. X. Seren called 911. She stayed with him, her hand on his forearm, talking in the low, even voice she'd learned in training, not to calm herself, but to calibrate the person in front of her. She sent Amara to flag down a park worker she'd spotted near the path. The worker came. The ambulance came 7 minutes later. X. Clifford Ashby was taken to Grand River Hospital with what would turn out to be a cardiac event. Not a full arrest, but serious enough that the ER physician said if he'd stayed on that bench another 20 minutes, it would have been different. X. Seren didn't go to the hospital. She walked Amara to school, already late, wrote a note for the teacher, and went to work. X. She didn't tell anyone. X. She didn't think there was anything to tell. X. She was wrong. X. 3 days later, a woman called her cell phone. The name on the call display said Hartwell. Seren almost didn't answer. She almost never answered numbers she didn't recognize. Something made her pick up. X. Is this Seren Addo? The voice was controlled, precise. X. It is. X. My name is Caroline Hartwell. I'm the daughter of Clifford Ashby. I understand you assisted my father in Victoria Park on Tuesday morning. X. A pause. X. He told you about that, Seren said. X. He did. Another pause, longer. I wanted to thank you. I'd like to, if you're willing, I'd like to meet, to thank you properly. X. Seren almost said no. She had a habit of saying no to things that felt complicated, but something in the woman's voice was not quite comfortable, the way people sound when they've been instructed to make a call they didn't initiate themselves, and Seren's instincts, honed by years of reading situations in rooms where reading wrong cost lives, said, "This is not simply gratitude." X. "Sure," she said, "coffee." X. They met at a place on King Street. Caroline Hartwell was 62, well-dressed, careful with her words. She thanked Seren for helping Clifford. She said her father had spoken about it at length. She said she was glad someone had been there. X. Then she said, "My father would like to do something for your daughter." X. Seren set down her cup. X. What kind of something? X. A contribution to her education. A fund. He asked me to arrange it. Caroline's hands were folded on the table. He's 81. He's been thinking about legacies. He was moved by what your daughter did, calling your attention, staying calm. He said she reminded him of someone. X. She's 6, Seren said. X. Yes. Something flickered in Caroline's face. He knows. X. Seren said she would think about it. She said she didn't want anything in return for helping someone. She said if Clifford Ashby wanted to donate to something, there were children's hospitals. There were food banks. There were 100 places more deserving than her daughter's heiress respite. X. She walked home from that meeting and stood in her kitchen for a long time. X. She thought, this is fine. This is just a kind old man. X. She thought, why does this feel like something else? X. Clifford Ashby, it turned out, was not simply a kind old man. X. He was the retired Chief Justice of the Ontario Superior Court. He had served on the bench for 22 years. He had written decisions that were still cited. He had 2 honorary degrees and a portrait in Osgood Hall, and a profile in the Globe and Mail from 2014 that called him one of the most consequential legal minds of his generation. X. Seren found this out the way most people find things out now. She Googled him. She sat on her couch with Amara asleep in the next room, and she read about this man she'd found on a bench with his hand pressed to his chest, and she felt something she couldn't quite name. Not exactly discomfort, but awareness. The awareness that what had felt like a simple morning in the park had threads attached to it that led somewhere she couldn't see yet. X. She was right. X. 2 weeks after the coffee meeting, Caroline Hartwell called again. X. My father has made a decision, she said. He'd like to establish the fund in Amara's name. $100,000 directed to her education, managed by our family's foundation until she reaches majority. He's asked his attorney to draft the paperwork. X. Seren sat very still. X. $100,000. X. She was a woman who had once gone 7 weeks without reliable electricity and learned to sleep through artillery. She was not easily moved by numbers, but she thought about Weber Street East. She thought about the lunch bags. She thought about what $100,000 in an education fund would mean for a 6-year-old girl whose mother had a basement apartment and a job that paid reasonably but not remarkably. X. Let me see the paperwork, she said. X. She was not naive. She was not a woman who signed things without reading them. X. The attorney's name was Brendan Moreau. He sent a document package by email 2 days later. Seren printed it, read it twice, took it to a legal aid clinic on Frederick Street, where a young woman named, well, you'll meet her in a moment, reviewed it with a fine-tooth comb. X. It's clean, the legal aid lawyer said. Her name was Priya. She was 28 and wore her hair in a bun and had a habit of tapping her pen on the desk when she was thinking. Nothing unusual, standard education trust structure. The only thing I'd push back on is this clause here. She tapped the page, which gives the foundation discretion over disbursement timing. I'd want that specified. X. So I ask for it to be specified, Seren said. X. Yes. X. Seren emailed Brendan Moreau and asked for the clause to be amended. X. He agreed immediately. X. Too immediately, Seren thought. But she told herself she was being paranoid. She told herself not every simple thing was complicated. She had spent years in environments where trust was a liability. She needed to learn how to accept a gift. X. She signed the paperwork. X. She told Amara that a nice man wanted to help her go to university someday. X. Amara said, is it the man from the park? X. Yes, Seren said. X. He had sad eyes, Amara said. X. Seren looked at her daughter. X. Yeah, she said, he did. X. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Wednesday morning in early November. X. Seren was at work when she got a call from an unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was from a journalist at the Waterloo Region Record. The journalist said her name was Felicity Osman. She said she was working on a story, and she wanted to speak to Seren about her connection to Clifford Ashby. X. Seren called Priya. X. Don't talk to her, Priya said without hesitation. X. Why? What kind of story? X. A pause. X. There's been a complaint filed, Priya said, with the Foundation's Oversight Board. I just heard about it this morning. I was going to call you. Someone has alleged that the fund was established under undue influence. X. Seren sat down. X. Undue influence, she repeated. X. It's a legal term. Essentially, the allegation is that you manipulated Clifford Ashby into establishing the trust, that you used the incident in the park as leverage. X. The room felt very quiet. X. I called 911 then, Seren said. I stayed with him until the ambulance came. I walked my daughter to school. X. I know. X. I didn't ask for anything. His daughter called me. X. I know, Seren. X. Who filed the complaint? X. Priya paused. X. Clifford Ashby's son, she said. Warren Ashby. He's retained counsel. Very senior counsel. X. Warren Ashby was 58. He ran a commercial real estate development company in Toronto. He had, Seren later learned, expected to manage the distribution of his father's considerable estate. He had expected specifically to have significant influence over the foundation and its assets. X. He had not expected his father to direct $100,000 to the daughter of a woman he'd met on a bench in a park in Kitchener. X. The story that Felicity Osman was working on, the story that would run 6 days later on the Record's website and then get picked up nationally, painted Seren Addo as a woman who had engineered an encounter with a vulnerable elderly man in order to extract a financial benefit. X. The story did not say this directly. It didn't have to. It used words like alleged and questions have been raised, and sources close to the family. It included a photograph of Seren taken from her LinkedIn profile. She was in uniform in it, which should have been a mark of credibility, but the way they cropped it made her look, she thought, like someone to be wary of. X. It included a quote from Warren Ashby's attorney, a man named Jeffrey Platt, who had been practicing Bay Street litigation for 30 years, and whose voice, when Seren later heard a clip of it in a radio interview, sounded like someone who had never once doubted that the world was organized around people like him. X. My client's father is an elderly man recovering from a significant cardiac event, Platt said. His judgment at the time the fund was established may not have fully reflected his usual capacity. We are asking the appropriate questions. X. Seren read the article sitting at her kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night. Amara was asleep. The apartment was quiet. The furnace made its clunking sound the way it always did when the temperature dropped. X. She read it twice. X. Then she put her phone face down on the table and she sat there for a long time without moving. X. She thought about Molly. She thought about what it felt like to be in a situation that could go very badly, where panicking was the one thing you absolutely could not afford. She thought about the breathing exercises they'd taught her in her 3rd year of service. She thought about her daughter, asleep 10 feet away, who had said that the man from the park had sad eyes. X. She thought, I will not let this undo me. X. She called Priya at 7 the next morning. X. I need to know everything, she said. X. The hearing before the Foundation's Oversight Committee was scheduled for the 2nd week of December. Platt had submitted a 40-page brief arguing that Clifford Ashby had been in a compromised mental and emotional state when he instructed his attorney to draft the trust documents, and that the influence of a person unknown to the family, that was how Seren was referred to, a person unknown to the family, had been determinative. X. Priya filed a response. She was good. She was organized. She found the paramedics who had responded to the 911 call and got their statements. She found the park worker Amara had flagged down, a man named Pete who worked for the city and remembered the morning clearly. She found Clifford Ashby's own cardiologist, who provided a written statement that Clifford's cognitive function was not impaired by the cardiac event and had not been impaired at any point in the weeks that followed. X. She also found something else. X. She found that Warren Ashby had, in the 18 months prior to the park incident, attempted on 3 separate occasions to have his father declared incapable under the Substitute Decisions Act. All 3 attempts had failed. All 3 had been dismissed as without merit by the capacity assessors who conducted the reviews. X. In other words, Warren Ashby had been trying to gain legal control over his father's decision-making for a year and a half. He had failed. His father had given money to someone Warren hadn't chosen, and now Warren 1 was trying the same strategy again with a different target. He's not protecting his father, Priya said, when she showed Seren the documents. He's protecting his expectation. Seren read the papers. She thought about Jeffrey Platt. She thought about the 40-page brief. She thought about what it cost, in money and in psychological weight, to fight people who had 30 years of Bay Street behind them. Can we win, she said. Priya looked at her steadily. Yes, she said, but you're going to have to speak. The hearing room at the Foundation's offices on University Avenue was smaller than Seren had expected. A long table, 8 chairs, a window that looked out onto the street below. Jeffrey Platt sat on one side with 2 associates. Priya sat on the other side with Seren and a colleague from her clinic. Warren Ashby sat at the end of the table. He was not what Seren had imagined. He was smaller than she'd expected, soft-faced, with the look of someone who had always had resources and had therefore never had to develop the particular quality that comes from not having them. He didn't look at Seren when she came in. He looked at the table. His father was not in the room. Clifford Ashby had submitted a written statement, 12 pages, in his own handwriting, which the committee chair, a retired judge named Dr. Ann Carver, had entered into the record at the start of proceedings. Platt made his presentation. It was polished. He used the word vulnerable 14 times. He used the phrase exploited the moment twice. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Then Priya presented the paramedic statements, the park workers' statement, the cardiologist assessment, the 3 dismissed incapacity applications. She laid them out calmly, one after another, like someone setting a table. And then Dr. Carver said, Ms. Addo, would you like to say anything? Seren stood up. She had rehearsed. She had pages of notes. She had thought about every word. She put the notes on the table and didn't look at them. I was walking my daughter to school, she said. I'm a veteran. 8 years in the Canadian Armed Forces. I've done 2 tours abroad. I came home, I got a job, I'm raising my daughter. That morning in October, I saw a man who needed help. I called 911. I stayed until the ambulance came. I didn't take anything. I didn't ask for anything. She paused. His daughter called me. I said I didn't want anything. She called again. I read the documents with a lawyer before I signed them. Another pause. I am not a person unknown to this family. I am the person who was there when no one else was. The room was quiet. Warren Ashby looked at the table. My daughter is 6 years old, Seren said. Her name is Amara. She is the one who saw him first. She is the one who pulled my sleeve. She stopped. I just want the committee to know that. She sat down. Dr. Carver made a note. The committee deliberated for 9 days. During those 9 days, the story continued to circulate. Jeffrey Platt gave another radio interview. Warren Ashby's name appeared in a column in the National Post with language about the ethics of windfall transfers. Someone in a Facebook group for Kitchener residents posted Seren's LinkedIn photo and a link to the article, and the comments were the kind of comments that exist at the worst intersection of race and assumption and the particular cruelty of strangers who feel entitled to verdict. Priya sent Seren a message, don't read the comments. Seren had already read the comments. She took Amara to school, she went to work, she came home, she made dinner. She read Amara a story about a bear who couldn't find his hat and then found his hat. She sat at the kitchen table after Amara was asleep, and she did not let herself come apart, because she had learned a long time ago that coming apart in the middle of a situation was a luxury that had to be paid for later with interest. She called Bev. Tell me something that has nothing to do with any of this, she said. Bev talked for 45 minutes about a plumbing issue in her bathroom and a disagreement with a neighbor about a shared fence and a recipe she'd tried that had been, in Bev's word, catastrophic. Seren sat on the couch and listened and said, in the right places, and felt by the end of it marginally more like herself. You're going to be okay, Bev said, before they hung up. I know, Seren said. She mostly believed it. The committee's decision came on a Thursday afternoon. Priya called Seren at work. They've ruled in your favor, she said. The trust stands. They rejected the complaint in its entirety. They found that there was no evidence of undue influence, that Clifford Ashby acted with full cognitive capacity and clear intent, and that the allegations were. Priya paused, and Seren could hear the satisfaction in her voice, the particular satisfaction of someone who had done real work and seen it matter, and that the allegations were, in the committee's words, unsupported by any evidence and undermined substantially by the documentation provided. Seren was standing in the parking lot of the logistics firm. It was 3:30 in the afternoon. The sky was the particular gray-white of a southern Ontario afternoon in December, that sky that looks like it's deciding whether to snow. She said, "Okay." "Okay," Priya said. "Seren, they ruled for you." "I know," she said. "Thank you, Priya, really." She went back inside. She finished her shift. She picked up Amara from after-school care. They walked home the way they always did, taking the long way through Victoria Park, past the fountain that was still off for the season, past the bandshell where the pigeons were settling in for the evening. Amara found a stick and started clattering it along the fence. They passed the bench by the war memorial. Seren looked at it. She hadn't been back to this bench since October. She hadn't been avoiding it. She just hadn't been back. She stopped. Amara stopped too, because Amara always noticed when Seren stopped. "Is that where the man was?" Amara asked. "Yes," Seren said. "That's where he was." Amara looked at the bench for a moment. Then she kept walking. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived by registered mail from the offices of the Ashby Family Foundation. Seren signed for it. She sat at the kitchen table and opened it. Inside was a handwritten note on cream-colored stationery. The handwriting was careful, slightly unsteady at the edges, the handwriting of an 81-year-old man who still believed in writing things down. "Dear Ms. Addo, I want you to know that I was informed of everything. I want you to know that I am sorry. Not for the gift, I do not apologize for that, and I will not, but for what was done to you in the weeks that followed, for the words that were used, for what was implied. You did not exploit a moment, you were the moment. My late wife used to say that the people who show up when it's inconvenient are the only people who really show up. I think she was right about most things. Please give my regards to your daughter. She has good instincts. That is not a small thing. Yours truly, Clifford Ashby. Seren read it twice. Then she folded it along its original creases and put it in the kitchen drawer where she kept things she intended to keep. She thought about what it would mean for Amara to have that money waiting for her when she was 18. Not the amount, though the amount was real and it mattered, but the fact of it. The fact that someone had looked at her daughter and decided she was worth something, not because she was spectacular or unusual, but because she had pulled her mother's sleeve on a cold Tuesday morning and said "Mama" and pointed at a stranger who needed help. Amara was in the living room, drawing. She had been going through a phase of drawing extremely complicated maps of places that didn't exist. She had names for all of them. There was one she called the Warm Country, one she called the Long Lake Place, one she called simply Where the Good People Live. Seren watched her from the doorway. Some things don't resolve cleanly. Warren Ashby did not apologize. Jeffrey Platt moved on to his next file. The Facebook comments stayed up until someone eventually reported them and they came down 3 months later, by which point most people had forgotten. The National Post column was never corrected. The paramedics who responded that morning in Victoria Park, a man named Devraj and a woman named Simone, never knew what happened after. They never knew that the woman who'd made the call had to fight for weeks just to keep the thing that came from it. They just went to their next call. That's how it usually goes. Most of what holds a person together happens off camera. But Amara keeps drawing her maps. And in the Warm Country, in the Long Lake Place, in wherever it is that the good people live, there's a bench and a fountain that's been turned off for the season, and a man with sad eyes who is going to be okay because someone stopped. That's the whole story. That's all of it. I think about Amara a lot. Not the trust fund, not the hearing, not Platt and his 40 pages. I think about a 6-year-old girl dragging a stick along an iron fence on a cold Tuesday morning, and then stopping. Just stopping, because something in her knew. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. There's a version of that morning where Amara doesn't stop, where she keeps walking, keeps clattering that stick, and Seren doesn't see Clifford on the bench until they're already past him. And by then it's too late to double back without it feeling like an effort. and efforts in the cold at 7:43 in the morning are easy to talk yourself out of. I know that version. I've lived that version. Most of us have. We keep walking because stopping is inconvenient, because we're late, because we tell ourselves someone else will handle it. Amara stopped. And what strikes me, what I keep coming back to, is that nobody taught her to stop in that moment specifically. You can't teach a child to stop at exactly the right bench on exactly the right morning. What you can teach them is the habit of noticing, the habit of caring enough to say something out loud even when they're not sure what the something is. Amara said, Mama, and pointed. That's it. That was enough. Everything else followed from that one small act of paying attention. I think what Seren did in the weeks that followed took a different kind of quality, the kind that doesn't announce itself, that doesn't look like courage from the outside, that looks instead like just showing up to work and making dinner and reading bedtime stories about a bear who lost his hat. The capacity to stay functional when a system is working against you, to keep making rational decisions when everything around you is designed to make you doubt yourself. That takes something that gets built quietly over years. Seren had it because she'd had to build it. That's not luck. That's the compound interest on hard experience. And then there's the intelligence of it. Not book intelligence, the other kind. The kind that made Seren read the paperwork twice before she signed it. The kind that made her call Priya at 7 in the morning instead of panicking alone. The kind that made her, when she finally stood up in that room on University Avenue, put her notes on the table and not look at them. She knew that what the committee needed to hear wasn't an argument. It was a person. She gave them a person. Those three things. The goodness in a child who notices, the steadiness in a woman who doesn't break, the clarity to understand what a moment actually requires. They didn't appear from nowhere. They came from choices. Small, daily, mostly invisible choices about what kind of people to be. Warren Ashby made choices too. That's the part that doesn't go away. He had a father who was still alive, still sharp, still capable of gratitude and generosity, and instead of being grateful for that, he spent 18 months trying to take it from him. The story doesn't end with Warren being punished, exactly. It ends with him sitting at a table, not looking at the woman he tried to destroy, while his father's handwriting entered the record as evidence that the old man knew exactly what he was doing. That's the reckoning. Not dramatic, not satisfying in the way movies are satisfying, but real. Amara keeps drawing maps of places that don't exist. In one of them there's a bench by a fountain. I like to think that's not an accident.